Hello, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. I'm Lee Camp, the most censored comedian in America. And thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. Just a word to the wise, not my books behind me. So I apologize if there's the history of dental floss or something behind me and someone's offended. Anyway, so this is the Friday Moment of Clarity, in which I do something a little different. I play essentially random clips from mainstream media, and you and I get to mock them and tear them apart and discuss how fucking awful our mainstream media is together as a team. You know, we get to really come together and do this. And part of the key, part of the kind of point of this is that these are not the worst of the worst. These are not going through 45 hours of mainstream media and finding that clear there. Literally just click and play on essentially any of the mainstream media networks and seeing what we come up with, seeing what their normal fare is. So first today, so CNN and MSNBC last week. Today we're going to start off with good old Fox News. By the way, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe. Please do that. And for anybody who's watching at leecamp.net, my locals page, I will be doing a Q&A with you guys specifically starting around 3:30 of this live stream. So, all right, here we go. Fox News. Essentially, the first thing I hit play on. So, all right, here we go. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I got to give you a little bit of backstory. The fact that because it does jump into it, they're discussing the story that the Navy has a drag queen in their ranks who does stuff on social media, and there was something they said something about they are using the person as a brand ambassador, and I don't know whether that part is true or not. For the sake of argument, let's say it is true. Doesn't really matter that much, but we'll say Fox News didn't make that part up. Anyway. There we go.
Join the military because they want to serve our nation. They join to become warriors. They don't join to become social justice warriors.
Well, all the backlash summed up in these op-ed headlines. Going woke won't fix the military's recruitment problem. Another, Navy's drag queen is symbol of cultural narcissism. And this, the U.S. Navy's Bud Light moment. Mark T.
I'll keep going in a minute, but now, as many of you might know, the Fox News is utterly obsessed with drag queens and anyone who puts on a dress that is not, as they call it, a biologic female. They spend like 80% of their time discussing this shit. And first of all, fucking not a problem in our world, all right? Of the shit we're facing in this world, folks, do you honestly believe whether someone's dressing up as a woman is really that's the issue? The U.S. had killed fucking 6 million people in the war on terror, the global war on terror over the past 20 years. 6 million goddamn people. And yeah, the military's problem is that this one person is wearing a dress and some makeup. That's the problem we need to pinpoint. And I want to be clear here that Fox News is doing something that CNN does a different version of, MSNBC does a different version of, which is to tell us to hate each other based on what are really small cultural issues. That doesn't mean that smaller cultural issues can't sometimes play a pivotal role in someone's life. I mean, there are trans people who have been murdered in this country for being trans. There are drag queens who have been murdered for being drag queens. So I'm not saying that these are never important issues, but they, in this case, it's Fox News, wants you to believe these are the core issues. And you need to tear each other limb from limb over whether someone believes that a person who likes to wear a dress should have any dignity in this world. That is the key issue. That is what we should all hate each other over. And we just fucking rip the society apart based on that. And they need you to think that these far smaller than, let's say, the nuclear brink that we're on with Russia. Just to give one example, far smaller than most of the issues in this world, and that the U.S. is facing, that the world is facing, the environmental collapse. The 64% of Americans say that they have trouble buying and affording necessities. So just massive horror show in many ways for many people around this world. And they, in this case, Fox News, wants you to believe the main issue. I mean, the percentage of time they spend talking about drag queens or trans people is just unbelievable. They want you to believe that's the number one issue. And for CNN, it's, they'll do something else. I mean, it could be the reverse side of it. It could be that they want you to believe the number one issue in the country is that trans people aren't treated right, which, like I've said, can be a very important issue, but is not the key issue of our world right now. They can tear you apart by saying that everybody who ever voted for Trump is a racist, when in fact many people voted for Trump just because they believed Trump's lies. Many people who voted for Biden are racist. Biden has had phenomenally racist policies. Biden has locked up more black and brown people than Trump could have ever hoped to do. So, Biden is also racist in his policies, but they want you to believe, CNN, MSNBC want you to believe that it's just Fox News, it's just Trump that is racist. And so they want to take this cultural issue and define this world, define our country along those lines, so that you will ignore the massive actual issues in this country. The fact that we live in an inverted totalitarian system, a corporatocracy that is owned, the government is owned by corporate America. The fact that we live in a system that is that implicitly, innately involves environmental collapse, where the world has killed 50% of all wildlife over the past 40 years. The topsoil is dying. The ocean is acidifying. The planet is changing to a format, to an operating system that is not so good for humans. And all of that, they want you to believe, is not really that important. Really, what's important is that this guy we're showing you right here had on a dress. So let's continue. Now that I've got that out of my system.
Decent, former White House speechwriter for George W. Bush, and Patrick Murphy, former Democratic congressman and Iraq war veteran. Great to see you both. Congressman, I'm going to start with you. You served. What do you say about a program that is using drag queens to try to recruit?
Well, Harris, first, thanks for having me on. This is a good news, bad news story. The good news is that, as you just reported in the last segment, there's 12.7 new jobs in America the last 2 years. The bad news is we are hurting. We are tens of thousands shorts in warriors joining our military. It's been going on year after year after year.
Now, of course, the real issue here that neither of them are going to admit. This is the Democrat who's kind of defending that the trans issue is not an issue. And then they're going to go to a Republican who says, this is the every issue that matters right here is this trans issue. But neither of them are going to admit that the real problem with our military is the mass killing of innocent people. Like, they're not going to, right? That's not part of the debate. That can't be part of the debate. They're going to act like the debate is just whether our military is recruiting correctly. Are they doing it right? Are they grabbing up young men and women and various others? Are they grabbing them up right in order to send them overseas, or sometimes sitting in an office in Las Vegas, dropping bombs on people's heads? Are they doing it right? And this is part of how mainstream media propaganda works. is to make you think, in this case, right, you have two sides. You have the Democrat who's speaking right here, and you have the Republican on the other side who we'll hear from in a second. And one says, oh, trans people in the military is a horrible problem, or in this case, drag queen in the military, horrible problem. And the other person says, drag queen in the military, not a big problem. And they act like those are the two sides of the acceptable debate. How about the guy or woman on the other side who says, hey, this is really not an issue. And the issue is that our military is obliterating peoples around the world. The issue is that our military has killed millions of innocent people. The issue is that our military is involved in the worst kinds of war crimes and human rights abuses this world has ever seen. And the problem is that we spend trillions of dollars on this on military while we don't actually look after our own citizens. The problem is that our military is organizationally is the number one cause of climate change. If you talk about an actual organization on this planet, and like all of those, they could, right? None of that's in the debate. None of that can be in the debate. None of that is in the allowable parameters of the Overton window, right? And so what a segment like this does is not only tell you, oh, you should be frothing at the mouth that someone dare wear a dress and then go to the Navy. Not only is it that, which is what a lot of like liberals would say is the real, problem with Fox News. But the actual problem is that this is designed, both sides of this debate are designed to cover up, just put on some wallpaper across, put a veil over the real issues in this world, in this country. And that's what this really does. So a lot of liberals are going to agree with this guy on the right side of the screen, who's the Democrat, who says, hey, let them do whatever they do in their own time. But in fact, all of these people you're seeing on your screen are involved in manufacturing consent for war and having endless U.S. empire, colonialism, and destruction of other cultures.
The Trump administration and now the Biden administration, when our economy is going better, it is harder to recruit. And the Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines.
Are you going to get to the drag queen part?
Well, they're recruiting everywhere, Harris. They're going to churches,
so you
gyms,
served.
LGBTQ.
And first of all, thank you for your service.
And first of all, thank you for your service. I don't know if you caught the line he had in there. This is the Democrat, right? This is the guy on the right side of the screen is supposedly the left wing, but he's not left wing, right? They want you to believe Democrats are left wing. They're not at all. They're, as George Galloway says, two cheeks of the same backside. The Democrats and Republicans. But I don't know if you caught the line he said in there. When the economy's doing well, it's harder to recruit. Let's stop and analyze that for a moment. Isn't that a fuck job right there? When the economy's doing better, when people aren't struggling quite as much, when people are a little more employed, when people have the ability to ask for a slightly higher raise, then it's harder to get them to join the world's largest organization of mass human murder. Isn't that funny how that works? Why does that work like that? Let's sit down and have a discussion about that. Why is it that when people are just not struggling just a fraction as much, they don't join up to go murder and be shot at? Isn't that odd? Like, to me, that would be a worthwhile discussion on these networks. But you notice that discussion not being had.
You served in Iraq. You see anybody on the battlefield dressed in smoky eye and lipstick in a beautiful dress? Because they'll shoot that person first because they're not in camo. Seriously.
Oh, gotcha. That is possibly the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. And this is there's a whole network based on this shit called Fox News. You know what else wouldn't hide you very well in battle is everything else a soldier wears when they're not on the front lines. Do you think every other soldier that comes home and isn't wearing a dress but has on a tap out t-shirt, Do you think would they do well in the front lines of the battle wearing their fucking cargo shorts and their like I love the idea that she's like, hey, I have smoky eye on the front lines, then you're gonna get shot first. And she's saying it. The thing that perhaps is most offensive is, and the Republicans laughing here, but is if she had said that like she just thought it was a joke, then you'd be like, okay, not funny, but she thinks she's being funny. But she's saying it like, I am being serious, sir. In all seriousness, the soldier with the rouge on will get murdered first.
This how you get more people to join.
In the military, we just said, ruck up and shut up.
There
What
you
do in
go.
your own time.
Okay.
You be you.
That's-
You be you. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
But you got to be you in
Right.
camo.
Right, but we're not talking. But people are getting all fired up about what this guy's doing on his private time. This Navy yeoman.
Oh, wait a minute.
That's
Wait
his
a minute.
private
Wait a
time.
minute.
Not
It's
what it's
all-
happening.
Secretary Austin even was asked about this. I mean, come on. If it were just his private time, don't you think the secretary would have said, oh, I don't know what these people do in their private time? That's not what he said. Mark?
No, 100%. Look, this is just like the Bud Light controversy, except for one big difference. Our national security isn't hurt if Bud Light blows itself up. Our national security is hurt if the Pentagon's recruiting efforts fail. You know, the Army missed its recruiting goals last year by 25%, and they're on track to be short by 21,000 recruits.
Yeah, this is just like a Bud Light. This is just like a awful beer that tastes like piss, that puts one trans person on their can, and everybody in the right wing loses their fucking mind. But of course, that's what this is by design, is to make people think this is where the battle needs to be fought over our culture. Because they don't want you asking the real questions. They don't want you talking about Ukraine. They don't want you talking about the destruction that our military has caused. They don't want you talking about our economy and how it exploits everyone and how we should be united. The people who don't like was a trans person. I don't remember whether it was, and these are different things, but a trans person or a cross-dresser on their can. I think it was a trans person, but they want you to think that we should not be united fighting the class war that we are the aim of, that we are facing the barrel of. They want you to think that we should all hate each other. So the person who thinks that the trans person should be on the Bud Light can, and the person who thinks the trans person should not be on the Bud Light can, should hate each other and despise each other and want to rip each other apart, when in fact we should all be united to fight the people who are like the CEOs of Bud Light, like the richest people in the world. I don't mean the CEOs of Bud Light because they made a dumb economic decision or whatever, but I mean the richest people of the world, which I'm sure the CEOs of Bud Light count, although aren't they? They're centered in another country now, like Netherlands or something. But we should be aiming our ire not at each other, but instead going after the ruling elite. And issues like this are designed to tell us to ignore uniting. Whatever you do, don't get together with the guy who hates the Bud Light can and decide you should be working together to fight this class war so that people can actually be treated with respect, treated with goddamn dignity, rather than you have fucking children working in slaughterhouses across the Midwest. I'm not kidding. Literally, you have children working in slaughterhouses in this country because we're not standing up for each other. We're not working for each other. We're not fighting this class war that has been perpetrated against us for fucking decades. And instead, they want you furious that there is one person that they could find who's in the Navy and posts images of themselves in a dress or drag. That's what you need to focus your anger on.
Recruits this year. 4 of the 5 military branches are short, are expected to be short this year of their recruiting goals. That's a national security crisis. And the reason why Bud Light failed so badly is because they had contempt for their audience. They wanted to get rid of their fratty brand and elevate their brand. The Pentagon's doing the same thing with the military.
All right, so that's the end of the clip I had there. I think you got the two sides of that debate, of that meaningless, pointless debate. But I had spent last week on CNN and MSNBC, so I thought it would be good to do a little media breakdown with Fox News. And my point is that this is what you get when you turn on Fox News at any random hour. Is going to be shit like that, pure propaganda garbage. And of course, when they're having debates like that, they're not having the real debates. They're not talking to you about the real issues. All right, so now let's move on. I thought it'd be fun to look at a few minutes of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, with specifically the speech by the comedian. And by the way, hit subscribe, hit thumbs up, all those good things. In another 20 minutes or so, I'm going to switch over to just the members-only Q&A at leecamp.net. I'd love for you all to join up there. Anybody who joins there gets Dangerous Ideas, my new ebook, for free. You get it for free if you join up, become a member at leecamp.net. And I hope you do that. You also get other exclusive stuff like the Q&A that I'll be doing today in just a few minutes. But all right, so White House Correspondents' Dinner, as you know, I talked a little about it last week. It's a meaningless group of rich ass clowns getting together and going together. But so this is the comedian who'd been selected for this past week, and it's Roy Wood Jr. And I don't know him, but we were on. I'm not even sure I've ever spoken to him either, but we were on Montreal Just for Laughs New Faces together. I believe it was 2006, way back in the year 2006. And people consider him a political comedian because he's on Daily Show and stuff. But yet again, it's this idea of like political comedians that don't actually dig to the heart of the issues. You know, you have your anti-Donald Trump jokes, and you have a few Joe Biden falls asleep jokes, and that's the end of it. I'm not saying you can't have a Joe Biden falls asleep joke. I have Joe Biden falls asleep jokes. But I'm saying if you don't dig deeper than that most of the time, then you're not getting to the heart of fucking anything. So here he is and by the way, he seems, I'm not saying he is the worst of the world. What an asshole. I just think he's not gonna dig deep enough. Just realizing I closed it out. He's not going to dig deep enough on these issues. And that's what a successful comedian in these circumstances is, in the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where they all get together and generally, occasionally, there'll be jokes that hit a little hard, that you see the room get tense about. And I'm not saying nothing positive has ever been said at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but this is the type of thing that generally passes for the comedy that is allowable in those circumstances, in front of that room, and how you continue to have a career like he and pretty much every comedian who's ever done that job has. If you want to be on mainstream networks, if you want to be on The Daily Show, if you want to be a regular on Late Night and Letterman and all these things, then you do what Roy Wood Jr. here did, and you tell some jokes that aren't really hitting anyone too hard. And I specifically chose this point. So it's a 25-minute speech, which I'm not going to play off, but I specifically chose this part because he's talking about journalists and how important journalists are, and the level of hypocrisy when, well, I'll get to that, but I should just play it first.
Through different mediums, through television, through print, through radio, through whatever China let us see on TikTok. But the industry that covers all of these scandals isn't immune to them themselves. The issue with good media is that most people can't afford that. All the essential, fair, and nuanced reporting is all stuck behind a paywall.
All right. Just the idea that there is fair and nuanced reporting coming from those outlets in that room. That room is only filled with the courtesans, all right? It's only filled with the ruling elite of media. It is, there are no like tiny independent outlets. They're not having Mint Press and Gray Zone and what's Ben Norton's outlet again? It used to be called Multipolarista. They're not having those type of things, and the Real News and Breakthrough News and Consortium News and Truth Out and Truth Dig. Well, Truth Dig doesn't exist anymore, but because the liberals killed it. But Sheer Post, they're not going to have those there, right? They're not going to have me. They're not going to have anybody who's the outside of, again, the acceptable thought of your mainstream media. If you're currying favor to the ruling elite, if you're protecting their propaganda in one form or another, then you're in that room or you're invited to be in that room. Otherwise, you're not there. So he is under the assumption, and I actually think that I think he probably believes the things he's saying, which is almost sadder. But I think he believes that there is fair and nuanced reporting coming from our mainstream media, coming from our corporate media a lot of the time. I think he honestly believes that, which is just kind of sad. And he believes that a lot of good fair and nuanced reporting from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all those is hidden behind the paywall. And it's like, there's a lot of shit hidden behind the paywall, but it ain't fair and nuanced. It ain't fair and balanced. It ain't truth. It's the same propaganda bullshit that they've been perpetrating for fucking generations. That's what's behind the paywall. It's what's in front of the paywall. It's what's all over the paywall. It's all over the place. Anything that's been put out by the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times and all these outlets, it's the same shit of currying favor to the powerful that has been there for generations, but it's gotten worse. It's owned by even fewer and fewer global wealthy titans. Just a tiny number, handful of people own those outlets. And if you go out of line of what's acceptable at that outlets, you are not at those outlets anymore. Just look at Chris Hedges. If you want to see an accomplished person who gets pushed down if they dare be truly anti-war. Chris Hedges was a Pulitzer Prize winning war correspondent for the New York Times, comes out against the Iraq War. He is no longer at the New York Times. That's how that works. And you can see it again and again and again. Very few of these reporters get to the level that if you're going to speak out against empire, very few of them get to the level of Chris Hedges. But at the New York Times, usually they're weeded out earlier.
People can't afford rent. People can't afford food, not healthy food. They can't afford an education. They damn sure can't afford to pay for the truth. Say what you want.
Now, he's right. They can't afford those things, but he thinks the truth is at these newspapers. He thinks that New York Times and Washington Post and all those legacy media, and I don't know if he's also talking about the cable news. He thinks they have truth. He thinks they're bringing you truth. What? Just to tell you, as someone who has been the target, or at least a partial target, of hit pieces done by New York Times, NPR, Daily Beast, an assortment of others, they don't give you truth. New York Times, their main hit piece on me, front page of the art section, the New York Times, when I did my response to it, which proved they were lying in multiple regards, getting things provably wrong, that I could show the proof of how they had it wrong. They had multiple retractions ultimately in that article. They really should have taken the article down, but it shows how eager they were to do propaganda. And that's what the New York Times is. But he, Roy Wood Jr., believes they got the truth and they're hiding it behind a paywall.
About a conspiracy theory, but at least it's affordable. I mean, well, unless you Alex Jones, it costs you about $900 million. And I understand that we have to put the stuff behind the paywall because creating the truth is important. People can't afford the truth, but you all can't afford to go find the truth for free.
Still, he's under the assumption, he's pretending, he's telling these people that they are working hard for the truth. And, you know, they're trying to bring people the truth, and it's just so tough for them. They're working so hard to bring the truth. But, and I hope if you're watching this, you probably know that their job is not to bring the truth. Their job is to bring a very specific version of propaganda to support the U.S. empire. Occasionally, there are things that will lie outside of the kind of normal area of that truth. But in general, it all comes back to one really central theme. Sometimes it just has to do with ignoring. It has to do with lying through omission. Sometimes it just has to do with not covering the story. You know, a good example. I'll give you a current example and a past example. Current example: Nord Stream pipeline. We all know from Seymour Hersh's reporting on his own Substack, because he couldn't get mainstream media to cover it. We know from his reporting that the U.S. Was involved, planned, and perpetrated the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipelines, which put us closer to nuclear war than this country's been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. What did the mainstream media do? They essentially ignored it. Occasionally, they'd have an article. Both New York Times and Washington Post had an article about how we should stop asking questions about it. But in general, they ignored it, because ignoring it is part of their toolbox. Just ignore something, pretend that other things are more important, and people will move on. Most of this country probably does not know about Seymour Hersh's reporting, even now. Then you have to go back a bit, I'll give you one from history. The trial that about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. The only trial ever held in 1999. The King family against Lloyd Jowers and other entities, other unnamed government entities. And the jury, after hearing from 70 witnesses over many days, found unanimously that James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King Jr. That Lloyd Jowers, who was the bar owner working with certain Memphis police officers as well, and who were they taking orders from, likely went up the chain, although there's a lot of question marks, but likely went up the train to the FBI and U.S. government officials. But either way, it's government agencies that work to kill Martin Luther King Jr. And that trial was covered in the New York Times. There's a tiny little article about that big that was on page D9 or something in 1999, where they said, oh, little civil trial on death of Martin Luther King, found that he was killed by the government. And then they went on to do their best in that tiny little paragraph to defend the government and the empire and say it wasn't a real trial, it doesn't really count, it's the government didn't defend themselves. And it's like, I thought your job was the truth, to report what happened in the trial. No, your job is to defend the empire. Anyway, there's two examples of how our media really works.
The work you do as journalists is important, it's essential, it's dangerous.
It would be if they were real journalists. If they were actual, if that room had the real journalists, then he would be right. But if that room didn't have the real journalists, it doesn't have the real journalists. It has the courtesans, the servile flatterers of the empire, of the king, the people at the king's shoes going, that's who it has. That's who's up there and in that room.
My father was an embedded reporter on the front lines with black.
I just want to throw this in here. So he gets into how his father was a embedded reporter in Vietnam on the front lines. And I don't know. I've never read anything his father did. I don't know whether his father was one of those courtesans who was publishing the bullshit of the U.S. empire on the front lines of Vietnam, or if his father was doing real shit. I don't know. But kind of doesn't really matter. But what he said here was that your job as a journalist is dangerous and it's important, and you can only say a sentence like that if you then talk about Julian Assange, if you then talk about one of the most famous journalists and publishers in this world who has been tortured by the U.S. government for 10 years now. That is the only way you can say that and be legitimate. But of course, for some odd reason, he never mentions Julian Assange.
Black platoons in Vietnam. It was in the South African Soweto riots. He covered that. The Civil War in Rhodesia, which we know today as Zimbabwe. My father came back home and co-founded the National Black Network because he wanted to tell Black stories. So it's American Urban Radio Networks now, and they've been doing it 50 years, and that's part of what my father wanted to build, you know. And I know it was hard because, you know, Black daddies love telling you when something was difficult. They were shooting at me, boy, but I never dropped my tape recorder. My daddy tell war stories.
And yeah, he said his father was an embedded reporter, which generally there's some exceptions where people were embedded and they then spoke out against what they saw. But for the most, you know, one big example is Michael Hastings, who was basically became very close with not Petraeus, the other ones, the other general, McChrystal, and got the inside story and then published in Rolling Stone about how horrible McChrystal was. And then a couple of years later, Michael Hastings blew up in a mysterious car bomb. I'm not saying the two are connected. I'm just saying that happened. So generally when you're embedded, though, the reason it works in order to create propaganda for our military, for our empire, is because when you're embedded, the military doesn't just become your friend, they become your protector, especially if you're seeing real combat. Your life is in their hands. And so do you think that person is going to come home and really reveal the truth about what's going on over there? Or are they going to come home and do fawning reports about the people who saved their lives? That's what you're going to get from an embedded reporter.
Stories like Brian Williams. All right, Lester Holt didn't laugh at that one. Okay, so that one there.
And by the way, he mentions Brian Williams there, which Brian Williams, of course, is the anchor who lied about coming under fire. He said he was in a helicopter. He came under fire, and you know the story got grander and grander, and it came out it wasn't true. A different helicopter came under fire, and then he was removed from being anchor at NBC, I believe, of the nightly news, and it didn't destroy his career, but it greatly harmed his career. So here's the thing, though. It's not that I think Brian Williams should be allowed to go on late night shows and lie about getting shot at. I'd say that's not a good thing. But think of the breathtaking lies that all of our media tell all of the time. The unimaginable amounts of propaganda they pump out. And yet Brian Williams was removed for saying on a comedy show, he was on like, you know, Conan or Letterman or something, saying that he got shot at when he didn't. Now, I agree, he shouldn't be lying, but that's the thing that gets you removed from your anchorship at nightly news. How about fucking manufacturing consent for the goddamn Iraq war? How about that? How about manufacturing the endless parade of war crimes? Manufacturing consent for that. Like, that is what you should get removed from news. That is why. How about not talking about Julian Assange? How about not talking about environmental destruction? How about not talking about the breathtaking war crimes and crimes done by a ruling elite, the sociopaths that fucking rule these things? How about not talking about that? That should get you removed. Instead, he tells a story about how he got shot at once. And that's the thing that gets you pulled from anchoring our biggest news network television shows. And it's also the thing that allows Roy Wood Jr. to joke about, oh, what a lie, what a crazy liar he was. But all the rest of you, doing great.
Good journalism costs. That's the truth of the matter. Good journalism costs the people, but it also costs the journalists. It could even cost you your freedom. Talked about Evan of the Wall Street Journal sitting in a Russian prison as we speak on espionage charges.
So there you go. He gets the little virtue signaling moment where he talks about the Washington Post journalists in a Russian prison. Now, I don't feel that man should be locked up in a Russian prison. I don't feel any journalist should be locked up, assuming they are actual real journalists. And I don't even, well, anybody at the Washington Post is not a real journalist, but you know what I mean. Pretending to be a journalist, you shouldn't be locked up either. Pretending to be a little pretend journalist. But you can't say that fucking sentence without saying Julian Assange. You can't say, and by doing this, calling this a joke or whatever, by doing this, he is covering for the persecution and torturing of Julian Assange by acting like, oh no, it's only other countries where journalists get locked up, right? It's never the US or UK. That would never happen. It would never happen. It's just disgusting. And by the way, I mentioned this last week. Julian Assange has been mentioned, his name has been said at the White House press correspondents' dinner before by Randy Credico, who finagled a ticket, was in the front row, stood up and said, you should be talking about Julian Assange, and was dragged out and removed from the event. So Julian Assange was mentioned at one of these dinners. The person who mentioned him was then dragged out and thrown onto the street. If that tells you anything. All right, folks, I'm going to continue this at leecamp.net for all of my locals members. We're going to finish up this clip and do a little Q&A. So, I'll address any comments you have over there. Thank you for joining me, everybody. I hope you will share this, let people know. I'm going to do these media breakdowns every Friday, but I do live streams every Friday, Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you will join me a lot. But let's continue at leecamp.net, which is my locals page. If you're watching over there, nothing will change. So I hope to see you over there right about now. Okay. Let's see here. Hello, everybody at locals. And also, if you join up, you get my ebook. If you become a subscribing member, you get my ebook for free.